Welcome to the Collaborative Synergy podcast, where we bring together passionate, driven individuals to share their unique expertise, experience, and insight. I'm your host, Candria Rauser, founder of Collaborative Synergy Consulting. At Collaborative Synergy Consulting, we believe in the power of collaboration to achieve extraordinary results. Each episode, we'll dive into engaging conversations with industry experts, thought leaders, and change makers who are dedicated to making a difference. From project management and business analysis to leadership coaching and team building, our guests will share their knowledge, skills, and stories to inspire and empower you. Join us as we explore a variety of topics, learn from the best, and discover new ways to harness the power of collaboration. When we come together, we create a synergy that amplifies our strengths and propels us towards success. So let's connect, learn, and grow. Welcome to Collaborative Synergy Podcast. Welcome, Linda Pandey, to the Collaborative Synergy Podcast. Linda is joining us today as an independent coach and leadership consultant. I want to tell you a little bit about how Linda and I met. Linda and I met a few years ago when I took a training that she was teaching for Gallup. She was teaching the Clifton Strengths Coaching Certification class, and I really enjoyed the class. And then later on, I had the opportunity to join her as she put together a group coaching session, which I want her to share a little more about with us today because I found it to be super helpful and something that inspired me to do a similar type of group coaching in my own business. And so I'm really excited to have Linda here today and have her share a little more about her Masterminds group that she created. Yeah. So welcome, Linda.
Thank you so much, Candria. Happy to be here.
Linda, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, so my background primarily has been in the realm of leadership and talent development inside mostly financial organizations. And so I've had the benefit of working inside of mostly banking or credit union organizations. And then I had the great experience of working for Gallup for a couple of years. And then I also worked independently after working for Gallup. I continue to work independently, but I'm also a manager of talent development within the third largest credit union in the country. So I balance both of those in my life and fully enjoy it.
Well, I'm really excited to have you here. I'm excited for the listeners to learn more about Masterminds. So if you're ready, we'll jump right into the questions.
Great.
Do you want to share with the group a little bit about what is Masterminds?
So soon you and I will talk about sort of the history. How did I get here? But it's really something that I learned about through my own experience of wanting to join a mastermind. It sounded really interesting. I'm a firm believer in collective wisdom. So I joined a mastermind and then started learning about a little bit about the history of where it came from. And so I read a book by Napoleon Hill, who is, some people know him from the book Think and Grow Rich. He's written many books. And he coined the term mastermind, calling it like-minded individuals coming together to support, challenge, and elevate one another's success. And the thinking is, when two or more minds meet collaboratively towards a common goal, they create this sort of collective intelligence, a third mind. And so that's kind of the origin and the why behind, I'll explain shortly about why I chose to pursue it a bit more intensely. What also struck me is masterminds have been around forever, probably as long as we've been humans walking the earth. And some of the famous masterminds that he talks about in his book are Ford, Edison, Firestone, and John Burroughs. Having a mastermind, these were gentlemen who liked to go on camping trips and discuss business innovation and problem solving. So that's a very famous mastermind, but that's, in essence, it's a group of like-minded people trying to solve problems and be innovative together as a collective group.
It creates some synergy. That's nice.
Yeah.
What has inspired you to create a mastermind specifically for coaches, and how did that evolve since your first session?
Yeah, I'd like to just go back a little bit in time just to sort of give some context as to how the concept of collective wisdom evolved for me. The summer of 2020, the country was experiencing a lot of social unrest. And at the time, I was working for a financial institution where a leader really wanted her team to be able to talk about it to talk about their feelings, to process some some major things going on. And she wanted me to facilitate a town hall. And I said I'd be happy to do it, but I have to think about the process. So she hired a woman who had a background in something called restorative justice. And I thought she was amazing. And I became very interested in restorative justice and the structure of that process, and learned about that process and what makes that effective. And then I started becoming interested in learning about other things, like sometimes it's termed wisdom circles, or council is another name that it's known for, and then mastermind. So it's sort of they're very differently structured ways of tapping into collective wisdom, but the similarity is that their structure, and that the groups understand that what you get out of it is the group wisdom and and equitable sharing. And so that's really what inspired me to want to be a part of masterminds, to then ultimately want to facilitate masterminds. And shortly we'll talk about how masterminds can be used actually quite effectively inside of organizations for leadership development. But in terms of coaches, we all have the same purpose. I mean, we want to probably build our business with clients. We also care deeply about improving our skills. And so I thought, and some of us have very specific modalities, like you and I have strengths. Some people are experts on DISC, or they're experts on wellness coaching, or they're experts on, I know coaches who are sober coaches. There's all types of niche coaches out there. And I thought it would be really interesting to come together with a very specific purpose, which is coaching, and to talk to each other and learn from one another. And that's how it evolved into what I like to facilitate today.
What do you think makes mastermind structure so effective for professional development?
Well, first of all, what I'm finding, I do a lot in my own organization around leadership development framework. And leaders, especially when you reach the level of advanced leadership, like maybe vice president and above, one thing that we've learned from them is they love peer learning. They learn a lot from each other. They like to tackle real world problems, not just sort of go through a class and be done with it and go back to their email. So there's a real power in attending a mastermind as professional development inside of organizations, but it has to be structured. It absolutely has to be structured, because what happens inevitably, we've all experienced this, there will be somebody who takes over and talks too much, frankly, or someone who doesn't talk, or someone who gets bored and the topic's not relevant to them, or it doesn't have substance. So structure is really key to be effective. And I'm happy to share with you the structure that I think has been helpful. If you'd like me to now, I'll share with you this slide. The reason structure matters is that it keeps everything productive. It creates equitable sharing. It provides, what are we here for in terms of expectations? It maximizes the time. Nobody has a lot of time to be on a meeting just for the sake of a meeting. Plus, it actually, to have structure, builds a lot of trust and psychological safety and encourages accountability.
So I know we're going to jump into a little more on the structure that you've put together, but before we do that, are there any misconceptions that people have about mastermind groups that you want to share with us?
Yeah. The reality is there are mastermind groups all over the country, and a lot of them you can find on meetups, and a lot of them are wonderful. They're like-minded people coming together for a very specific purpose. But the reality is some of them are much better managed and facilitated than others. And I've been lucky because I've been part of ones that are really well structured and facilitated. And I've also been to some that are really poorly structured and facilitated. And so I think that leads to some misconceptions in that. Let me just put it this way. I think the two biggest misconceptions is you show up to a mastermind to bequeath your wisdom. That's not what we're here for. Or you're here to fix other people. Absolutely not. Nobody's needing fixing. We're here to share wisdom, not to tell people how to fix themselves. So sometimes I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that you're going to a mastermind to help other people. And I think that's a pretty bad attitude to go to a mastermind. You've got to keep open-minded about what are you here to learn. And and also I think that you have to understand that for it to be really substantive, there has to be some equity in sharing. And you have to kind of know when is it somebody's time to talk and when is it time for you not to interrupt and just listen. And so I think a misconception is really that it's about telling people what to do, and it's really not. It's really about a very collaborative interaction where you both listen deeply and share from your own experience that which will be helpful to other people.
I really enjoyed the recent Masterminds group that you led that I participated in. I think the group did a good job of balancing that, of really coming with questions and being open-minded and really following the rules that you're about to share in a few minutes with us on how to do a really great mastermind. But for right now, I think it's good for people to come with the mindset of why they're there and with that structure so that everybody gets something beneficial out of the session. And I felt like our group did that. How can the masterminds be applied within organizations?
I really appreciate that question because I really hope more and more organizations really consider this peer learning, peer coaching. They can call it whatever they want to. It doesn't have to be called a mastermind, but they can call it, in my company, they've also called it leadership cohort. Call it whatever you want. But the way it can be applied to be most effective is probably keeping the groups relatively small, meaning I think when you get more than 10 or 12 people, you begin to lose some psychological safety. You begin to have eyes rolling that the same people are talking and or want to talk. And there's a certain intimacy and vulnerability created when these are relatively smaller cohorts or groups. I do think they can be temporary. I think that you can meet, one time on one subject. You could do it monthly, quarterly, however is appropriate for the organization. You could do like in our case, we did a 3-month session every other week. So that can be something you apply inside the organization. The way I've seen it work many ways, but is to think about maybe like positions coming together. For example, vice presidents coming together or just managers coming together to sort of tackle a real world issue. And we'll talk a little bit in just a moment about, what sometimes people bring to a group and gain from a group. But I really think it does need a facilitator. It needs somebody strong who doesn't have to be the center of attention, who's truly facilitating the conversation and not needing to bequeath their own wisdom, but really pulling it out of other people. But they are the ones who are being aware of the time. They're the ones who are aware of, is this person sharing too much, too little, and just keeping the respect going among the group, but also there are some really amazing moments that can happen. And the facilitator needs to know when to allow those moments to unfold. If they're unfolding, that's not the time to just suddenly shift gears because the clock says to. So I think that's how it can be applied inside of an organization, but you've got to have some good facilitators and you've got to have some intention and purpose behind the meeting.
I felt like you facilitated our session really well. I know there were a couple times where we could maybe cut it off a little early because we said everything we needed to and we didn't need to use the whole time allotted for that person. And then there were other times where that person was really engaged and you did a quick time check with us and just saying, I feel like everybody's getting a lot out of this conversation. Did we want to continue to talk? And that was really helpful because there were times where somebody had just a really great question that they brought to the group and all of us are benefiting from it. And we were all great with, yeah, let's just stay on this topic a little bit longer and let's talk through it a little bit more. So that was helpful. I enjoyed that part of your sessions. Can you share a story from past participation that illustrates the power of using this model?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So I'll use a couple of examples because masterminds can be personal issues, they can be professional issues, they can be tackling a very specific challenge at work. So I'll share with you maybe an example from each of those realms. I was involved on a personal level in a mastermind where a gentleman was having some challenges with his daughter, and he had recently divorced from his wife and feeling a bit separated also from his relatively, his teenage daughter. And he brought that issue to the group and felt, some sadness. And when he went on to date, he was worrying about his daughter's response and things like that. So the reason I think Mastermind was helpful is, first of all, we listened to him without interruption. And me being a daughter of a divorced couple, one of the things that you can share is, from my experience. And one of the things I was able to share with him was, from my experience, daughters love their fathers and want them to be happy, even if they feel a little resentful of them dating. She really does want you to be happy, most likely. And at the end of that session, he came up to me and gave me a hug because he felt like he needed permission to move on. And so that's what a mastermind is powerful for, is sharing your own perspective with someone without telling them what to do. You're not telling them you must do this, or, you're not advising them, but you're saying, look, this has been my experience. So that's a personal success story, in my opinion, that he felt more comfortable moving on. And it was the whole group. It wasn't just me, by the way. I don't want it to make it sound like my offering was what changed him. I think the whole group surrounded him with love and helped him see how okay it is to move on. Professionally speaking, I mean, you and I can talk about the coaching. One dynamic you all are facing, as we all face as coaches, is how do we build our business? What do we focus on? A lot of the time, one dynamic that happens with coaches is, do I work independently while I'm working full time? How does that look? And you noticed in our group, we had 3 people dealing with that very issue. Like, how do I build a business while, or do I take advantage of working at the same time? And so I think the success story was people come to new decisions about these things. One of the women in our group came to the decision that she was going to go with a consulting firm, but she was still going to allow herself to do some coaching on the side. And that was a really good decision for her to come to, because she was going to learn so much through the consulting firm. And we had other people who were debating, do I leave my company now? And all of us were like, well, here's our experience. It takes a lot of time to work up business and network. And I think that she realized that she could do some of both. So I think you come to some major decisions. And then in terms of professionally inside of organizations, I think one of the success stories is people, when they're in an intimate group together, especially at like that vice president level or manager level, they realize other people are tackling very similar problems. They're not alone. There's comfort in, wow, they're facing the same issues and this is how they're handling it. And I never thought about that. And inside my company, there are people who've worked there 30 or 40 years. There are people who have worked there for 5 years or less. So listening to each other on how do you tackle a specific issue is incredibly helpful to them in figuring out and not feeling like they have to know it all, but also feeling really supported in a new way of thinking. I hope those are considered success stories.
Yeah, it made me think about our earlier conversation where we talked about masterminds, and I started thinking there's been quite a few people who are maybe new to being a project manager, or maybe they've been one for a while, but they really just want to have the ability to network and connect with other project managers, see what other people are doing, see if there's something out there that might make life easier for them. And I think the concept, the masterminds concept, is such a cool tool to add to your toolbox to help people understand that they can use that to learn and grow and benefit each other. And so I'm super excited. We talked about it. I want to put something like that together and offer that service. So that's on my list of future activities to offer. But I think it's such a great opportunity for people to connect when they have, in particular, something like project management in common, or it could be change management or any business analysis or any type of background in common. Ours, as we had mentioned before, we were connected through Strength Finder, but there's so many different ways you can use it, and it's so flexible in that way. I really like it. I think it's a wonderful idea. So I'm so glad you're here. And I'm
Thank you.
super excited for us to get into the structure so we
Yeah.
can tell everybody how this works.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I love your, structured yet flexible. So that's really important. And that's something I've learned as a facilitator is that yes, you need structure, but you also need to be very flexible in the structure. So I think a process that works particularly well, and this probably needs to be a bit adjusted, just so you know. Now that I've been doing this, I think that sometimes we need more time than this. But I think a really helpful process is when you have, sometimes we call it the volunteer or the person in the middle or the spotlight lighted person, however you want to call it. Somebody is volunteering to, in essence, be in the center of the circle if we were all physically together. Most of these can be done very effectively virtually, just so you know. But the person in the center who's the volunteer will share an issue, anything that's of importance to them, something they're grappling with. Maybe it's a challenge or an opportunity or an issue that they want to just talk to a group about. It's really important that the group remains confidential. That's part of building trust, is that everything in the mastermind has to remain confidential. And I think it's a great practice to have, and we'll get into best practices in just a moment, but I think it's a great practice for people to sort of own their own timing. And in general, it's great for them to share maybe 2 to 3 minutes, just the issue, and everyone else is listening without interrupting and feeling free to take notes, sort of like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I want to take some notes about what they're saying. I love the term I once learned from a wonderful coach, listen for neon words. And neon words are those words that are either repetitive or dramatic, and you're just really listening deeply to the person sharing. And then it's time for the group to ask some questions. I think it helps if you start with asking questions, but it's also okay to be flexible and go right into some thoughts. But I think it does help to think about, what do you want to know? Because usually what they've shared requires more information to be learned from them. So having them expand by asking them some great open-ended questions. And then what's most important really is that the volunteer, the person in the middle, a really powerful question or statement rather that they give to the whole group is, what I want to hear from the group is. And I think it's actually really important to teach them to say it just like that, because it makes their mind realize they are asking something of the group. What I want to hear from the group is, and then slide here says 7 minutes. I would actually expand to think about going longer. What we notice now is that we probably needed longer than that, but I would still cut it off. Maybe you want to make it 15 or 20 minutes just so there's more time. But when the person says, what I want to hear from the group is, it's really interesting to people, to know what is it that they want from us. And that's where we want to share as a collective group our ideas, our thoughts, and our relevant experience. I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about avoiding too much advice giving. We will give some advice, and that's okay. I want us to all feel like comfortable with that, but they're not there to necessarily follow your advice. I think a more powerful way of sharing is to say things like, based on my experience, or this is what worked for me, or I noticed when I did this, this is what happened to me, or I've seen others be successful with this. It just allows for a much more co-creative moment for them to not feel like you're pushing your ideas. And then the last step is they kind of thank the group. And I think it's helpful for them to share what are their biggest takeaways so that the group knows what landed for them. It's okay if things didn't land, if they don't want to answer certain questions. But I think that is the best possible structure.
What are the most powerful questioning techniques coaches have learned through this experience?
Yeah, there are some great questioning techniques. And I think the four most powerful questioning techniques we learn as, certified coaches is to think about not asking the question why. And that kind of slams in the face of a lot of wonderful processes out there. There's a process called the 5 whys. Simon Sinek has written a book called Start with Why. Why is a wonderful, wonderful question when you are trying to get to root analysis, to get to the bottom of things. In coaching, it's a little different. When we ask a why related question, sometimes it makes somebody feel like they're on the witness stand. So we always recommend replace a why with a what or a how question. And that tends to lead to deeper thought by the person answering the question. So I always use the example of listen to the difference between, why did you make that decision? And if I ask it, what was important to you about that decision? You feel defensive when you're asked why, and you feel like you can expand when you're asked what. The next one that's very common for people, it's actually all of these are much harder in reality to overcome than they look, is learning as a coach to ask one question at a time and avoid stacking questions. So asking one question at a time, because people get really confused if you ask 3 or 4 questions in a row. They'll usually just answer the very last question. So that's just a habit we work on, and it takes a lot of effort, believe it or not, to get there. The other one is really following their thinking on what they need to answer. So sometimes I've heard the term neon words. I love that term. And listening to what they're saying and taking some notes on what are some repetitive words, what are some dramatic words. I was coaching a woman. She kept using the word selfish. She used it maybe 2 or 3 times, and there's your neon word. That leads to a great question. I've noticed that you've said the word selfish a few times. What about this feels selfish to you? Or what is your definition of selfish? Things like that. Or somebody might say, I feel really burned out, or I'm exhausted. Those are very dramatic words. I noticed you said burned out and exhausted. What is contributing to your feeling burned out or exhausted right now? So that's what we mean by follow their thinking. And then, of course, embracing silence. I always tell people, especially leaders who are used to talking a lot, make friends with the crickets. It's really okay to ask a question and pause. It's so awkward, I know, but if you don't take it personally, they are really just digesting your question. So those are, I think, the most powerful questioning techniques any coach can use.
Do you have some best practices that you would like to share in addition to the techniques you just shared?
Yes. So here are some best practices that I've learned and other expert facilitators. I don't know that I'd call myself an expert facilitator, but I would say that they've taught me too. One best practice that really helps is that the volunteer actually sets their own timer, not the group. Because what happens is that if you're talking, it's your turn, and my timer goes off, the last thing I feel like doing is saying, Candria, we have to interrupt you now because you're probably on an incredible roll. So a great best practice is to have their phone go off so that they get kind of jarred back into the present moment and they realize, oh, my own time is up. So that's a best practice. Another one is just to be mindful of, we could ask them questions all night long, but we probably need to get on with what do they want to get out of this? What do they want to hear from the group? So maybe 3 to 5 questions is a good number. And then really be open to what it is they want from the group. Sometimes we have these preconceived notions of, oh, this is what Candria is going to want to work on based on her challenge, but it turns out to be something completely different that she wants to learn from the group. So going where she wants you to go is a best practice. And then kind of being a little careful of being the consultant. So in other words, careful with our language about, oh, you should do this, or just do this, or you must do this. Really speaking from your own experience. This has worked in my experience. This I've noticed has worked for others. Really helps people buy into potential change because they're feeling like they're co-creating with you. I'm not a fan of assigning people homework. I know I could get into a really healthy debate with a lot of coaches about that. If people want homework, I will help them with that. I like them to come up with it themselves. But I think the group should be careful about assigning things to others or coming into the group as though I'm here to tell you how to be smart. because I'm so smart. I always say nobody needs to be fixed here. We're not fixing other people. We're coming in as a collective to learn from each other. And then, talking about accountability, which I know is a big deal, we have to not personalize other people not necessarily following through. In other words, it's not our job to hold them accountable unless they really want us to and make that very specific request. We have to kind of let it go. We call it accountability with grace. Just what were some wins from last time and not personalizing it as coaches or participants in the mastermind. If they couldn't follow through, we have complex lives. We have to move on.
I think those were all helpful practices that we applied on our coaching session, the last one that I did with you and the group that was with us. So thank you for sharing those. You mentioned accountability with grace. What role does accountability play in these sessions? Is there anyone that should be held accountable during the session?
Yeah, so the facilitator helps with that a lot in terms of us holding each other accountable to a process and structure. But in terms of, you know, when I start a mastermind, we did this together, is I think having some intentions, I'm a big fan of the word intention. Having some intentions at the very beginning of a mastermind is really powerful so that you're owning what you want to get out of it. And then having, some intentions for the next time we meet. What do I intend to do? What do I intend to create or design or think about? So I think the word intentions is probably the most powerful way of holding yourself accountable, and other people listening to your intentions helps create accountability as well.
I think the active voice of saying out loud, I intend to do this before our next session, made me feel like I had to hold myself accountable to doing that. And if I didn't, and I came back, I shared what I did instead, or how that morphed into something else. But it was helpful to have that dialogue at the end. I know when you wrapped up, you always said, what is your intention? What do you want to work on until we meet again? And then when we met, you opened with, so let's share a little bit about anything good that has happened since our last meeting or anything that you were able to accomplish. And that was helpful just to get us in the mindset, refresh our memories from what we did the last time, and kind of get us moving forward into the next session. So I felt that was a good technique, a good practice that you added.
Yeah, thank you. Good. I feel the same way.
What kind of growth do coaches experience after participating in a mastermind?
Well, Candria, as a coach, I have to put this question back on you because you were in the mastermind. So what growth did you experience?
That's super funny because as I asked the question, I felt like you might say that. I felt personally in that class that the growth came from just thinking about coaching differently, right? Thinking about peer coaching, thinking about how everybody was coming with something in common, right? We all had the strengths training background and we were all coaching in one way or another, some of us full time, some of us on the side, as you mentioned. But it helped me to just think about it from my business standpoint mainly. It gave me an opportunity to network, which I don't see myself as somebody who easily goes out and networks. And I've shared that in past podcasts. That's something that I really have to think about when I do it. I use my relator in my strengths and I connect really well, I think, one-on-one. But when I have to go outside that circle, that woo isn't as high for me. And so I have to really try to connect with people that I don't know. And I felt like this session helped me connect with people I might not have otherwise known. I knew you in the group and that was it. And so meeting the others was really cool. And to see that we had similarities, that we had experiences that we could benefit from sharing with each other, I felt like that was super helpful. And it also, as a coach, took the pressure off, hopefully you, because you didn't have to have all the answers, right? And there were so many different good ideas and good experiences shared by the group. No matter who had a question, I felt like every time we walked away with a couple ideas that we can think about and decide, whether or not we wanted to do things differently or we wanted to expand upon that, whatever it was that they suggested and learn and grow more on that topic. And so for me, it was just another way for me to see networking and opportunities to grow and maybe apply it in my own business for others that I coach.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. I mean, I couldn't have said it better because you experienced growth. And one thing I see a lot is you feel a sense of validation when you're with other people too, going through the same thing or facing some of the same mountains to climb. And so I think it's kind of like, wow, I'm not alone in this. I'm others are grappling with similar dynamics or issues. I think it's a very empowering experience to go through a mastermind.
Yeah, and I think the first session, everybody was really focused on, for example, strengths, because that's what we had in common. So it allowed us to have that common language and that common connection. But as the sessions carried on, you notice that we expanded, right? The group started to see other connections, whether it was they want to be an entrepreneur or they are an entrepreneur, or maybe they're struggling to make that choice. And so I see value in the longer term session because you build that psychological safety and that comfort with each other. And it was really fun. We talked about it then, remember, wouldn't it be great to just like have a reunion and come back together? Maybe we want to do that at the end of summer or something, because we really felt like we were connected in a way that we weren't maybe the first session. So that having that 3 month every other week was a nice way for us to build up that confidence and that comfort and really get to know each other.
Yeah, so well said.
How does a mastermind help independent coaches build their business and networks, since we're talking about that?
Yeah, so just as a reminder, masterminds can be any subject. The ones I've been involved in quite a bit are for independent coaches. And the big issue they are grappling with is building business and network and modalities and thinking through a lot of different things. Again, I would almost put this back in your plate a little bit, but here's what I saw. I saw independent coaches, when they get to talk to each other, they see some of the realities of what's tough about being a coach. I think that some of those realities need to be more widely understood. The world is full of coaches, and some are more talented than others, some are better trained than others, some aren't trained at all. Some people just call themselves a coach or get into it because they think, oh, I want something that lets me travel the world and not show up in an office. There really are a lot of different intentions behind wanting to be a coach. And so I think a mastermind, when you come together with other coaches, is also really helpful to talk about your own challenges in building your own business. And there are some coaches who are extremely successful in the realm of digital media. That's not something that comes naturally to me, but it comes naturally to a lot of coaches. Like, hey, I have no problem being on YouTube and Instagram and all these sites. And there are some coaches who are really strong keynote speakers. There are some coaches who realize that they have to diversify their coaching in order to make a good salary with other things. And I think when coaches come together and they realize, oh, I don't have to just coach to make a living, or I can let my niche unfold. I don't have to figure it out in my first year even. I can let it reveal itself to me. I think that you just benefit so much from hearing from one another. And that's how it helps you build your business, because you're fine tuning ideas and strategies, and you're fine tuning who are your most meaningful network. And the mastermind ends up being a network for you, which is fun.
Yeah, I think it was neat to see everybody's story and how we all were going at it from different angles, and that it was okay that we all did it differently, and hearing what worked for one and may or may not help another, but it did open that window of opportunities that, hey, there's more than one way to do this. I could do
Yeah.
this, by, like you said, having a job and doing it on the side, or I could do it by diversifying my work. And I think it's very helpful as a business owner to see that there's more than one way, that people are successful using these different ways, and that there's different ways to measure success, right?
Yeah,
We talked a little bit about that
absolutely.
during the group sessions. So I agree. I think it is helpful to build your business and your networks. And I really like the session. That's why I said I just see this being such a great tool that I hope to be able to use it in my own business. And
Good.
I'm so glad that you're sharing all of your knowledge with the group today so that they hopefully can have some takeaways and either go to one of your sessions or maybe start
Yeah.
their own version of a session and experience the benefits of it. What shifts do participants typically experience in their confidence and coaching style from your experience when you have hosted these?
I'd like to put that question back on you first, and then I'll answer with my ideas.
For me, I think it was a synergy of kind of learning everybody's experience and styles and then hearing about your approach. So for me, it made me feel more comfortable with applying it because not only did you teach us by showing us here's how I would do it typically and here's some best practices and some techniques to make us more successful, but you also have a very supportive and nurturing style that made it feel very safe for us to practice. I remember the first session that we had wasn't truly a session, it was a trial, come to this and see if you are interested in joining a coaching session. And I showed up and I didn't know what I was expecting because it wasn't, a training like I had done with you before. It was something new and I was just curious what you were up to and thought it would be a good chance to connect again. So I showed up and listened, and then I decided, you know what? I normally don't volunteer for things, but I'm going to go outside my comfort zone because I know you and I trust you are going to be a safe place to do that. And I said, I'll share first, right? So I got to experience that first kind of example session and it went really well. And I felt really good about it. And I was like, you know what? This is actually super helpful. I want to go through the experience of doing the series and kind of hear other people because that one session was just a really short session, right? It was just to give us a little taste to see if we were interested. So not everybody was able to share. I only learned, for the question that I presented to the group. And so for me, I think it was a chance to try something new in a safe environment and build that confidence. And then when we did get to the session, because I had already done it, you were super positive about how it went. It made me feel even more confident the next time when it was my turn to share again. I didn't have any problems and I kind of knew what I wanted to say or talk about because I knew what to expect. And so I came into the session feeling ready and excited to hear what everybody was going to share.
Well, that's great. I couldn't have answered that better myself, so that's why I asked you.
What do you think some of the unexpected benefits are for coaches that join the sessions with you?
Well, I'm going to speak from the perspective of me being part of another mastermind myself, because I am a participant. They always say the best coaches have a coach, which I think is true, and the best probably mastermind participants are in their own mastermind. So I facilitate them, but I'm also a participant in a mastermind. And I will just speak from that perspective. I think the unexpected benefit that I realized was, oh, I can't wait to bring that to my mastermind. Or I'm grappling it with an issue right now and I'm formulating in my mind, how am I going to present this to my mastermind so that it makes sense in terms of a challenge, but what is it that I really want to hear from the group? So the benefit is it almost feels like you look forward to getting support and this, collective wisdom.
I think also a benefit was some of the questions that other people asked, I didn't think to ask. And when we finally went
Yeah.
through and heard the question and then heard the coaching, I realized like that was super valuable. I'm so glad they asked that question,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I've noticed is, again, some people are very comfortable in certain realms and have really pushed through to achieve things. And some people are, I don't really know that I like this term, but maybe they're not as far ahead in certain things. They're just starting as a coach. And so you've got these different perspectives so you can sort of self-reflect and say, wow, I've really come a long way. Or look at that person, wow, they overcame this and now look at where they are. So you see all these really interesting different vantage points in people's process and where they are in their careers.
It's so helpful to hear the stories and then
Yeah.
be able to think about your own story and
Hmm.
what do you want that story to be? How do you want to tell that story? How do you want to write it?
Yeah.
So I know we just finished a masterminds with you and you were going to take a little break, but I know that you're going to have some upcoming masterminds and maybe expand beyond strengths coaches. So what inspired that shift? And are there other areas that you're thinking that you might do a mastermind in?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, part of the reason I'm taking a break has nothing to do with the fact that these don't energize me. They energize me so much that I want to really incorporate them into the organization that I work for. So, I do have a full-time job in addition to doing independent coaching and consulting. And I really want to incorporate Mastermind into my organization. So that's coming up for me as part of our leadership development framework. But you and I are strengths coaches. We're very focused on, we're both certified through Gallup as Clifton Strengths coaches. That's a very specific niche. Not everybody gets certified in that particular modality, which is a very powerful modality, by the way. I love it in our coaching. But it kind of excludes some people who are really strong coaches. And so one of the things I've been thinking about is why not have coaches from multiple modalities, people who coach in all different ways and all different have different training backgrounds and have been educated in coaching in different ways. I'd like to do that. And so that will probably be my next adventure in the world of masterminds. The other thing is that I think there's an opportunity to do masterminds with other subjects, not just necessarily coaching. I mean, there's a whole realm of people in human resources who are facing a lot of dynamics in that realm that probably could use a good facilitator to talk to each other. In terms of a mastermind, there are people who work in leadership roles in different types of companies who would benefit from talking to each other. So I think there are just sort of endless opportunities, but there's only so much time in a day.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I would love to apply this to project management. So I teach
Yeah.
project management classes, and I've had people ask me in the past, do I coach? And I said, yes, I do. My business, I also do coaching. And, a couple people have talked with me on the side and they just didn't know what they wanted, right? They want to be coached, they want to learn, they want to grow, but they're not quite sure what to ask. And I think having a session where it's not just one-on-one, where you're not coming with a specific thing that you need to work on, but where you're coming with a group of people, you're doing more of a networking than an individual coaching, allows you to show up and listen and generate those ideas and those questions and just get comfortable and learn from each other. And so I'm hoping that this will be one of those opportunities that I can offer where people that want to learn and grow and maybe get some kind of coaching, but they really don't know how they want to do that or what they want to talk about, they won't feel that pressure that they have to tell me exactly where they want to grow or what their professional struggle is that they want to work through or whatever that is that they want coaching for. And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited to try it out and see how it goes. I'm very optimistic based off the experience I had with you already that this is going to be a wonderful tool for the group of people that I'm thinking of, and I'm super excited to try it out. So I'll keep you posted and let you know how that turns out.
Good. I'm excited for you.
How do you see masterminds groups shaping the future of coaching for communities?
Yeah. Wow, I have a lot of feelings and thoughts about this. I think more than ever, from my perspective, we're seeking a sense of community and a sense of communal support. And I just see any type of collective wisdom, no matter what you call it, if you call it a mastermind, if you call it wisdom circles, if you call it counsel or restorative justice, whatever process, they are all equally powerful and beneficial in terms of bringing people together to feel supported and connected with each other. And that to me is the definition of community, is feeling like you have other people to lean on who are going through similar challenges. We're all human beings. And I guess I see the future as just saying, look, we need collective groups. We need wisdom. We need each other. We're all in this together. but it does have to have structure to be truly substantive. I'd like to think that there could be some drop-in groups, or, when you need community, show up. When you have a challenge you want to talk about, show up. But it does have to have some focus and some purpose. But I like that idea. So I just see more and more of us really needing each other in this way.
I like the thought that you can do a masterminds group virtually or in person, right? The structure is very flexible. It works both ways. And so in person, if you have the opportunity to do so, that's always helpful to have the person in front of you and the body language and everything so that you can factor all that in when you're talking. But as we've learned over the last couple of years, virtual is also helpful because it allows us to connect with people all over the world, right? And so that has been super helpful. And I think this tool works really well. I think in our class, didn't we had somebody there from California, Washington, at one of the meetings, somebody in BC.
Yep. Yeah.
And the East Coast time, I don't remember where exactly was
Yeah.
there because they had a different time zone that they were working with. So it just allowed us to make connections with groups that, we wouldn't be able to meet in person likely with. So much value in hearing their story and learning about them and getting to know them. So that's another cool tool that you can use either way and see the benefit either way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And build that community, right? Expand it.
Yeah, you
Expand.
can. Yeah, there are people all over the whole world who could be part of a community. Yeah.
I loved, in my case, I took both DISC and Strength Finder. I also took the 5 behaviors class. And in each of those, I really enjoyed the fact that there were people all over the world in those classes.
Yeah.
It wasn't just my local community,
Yeah.
although I love meeting with the people that are local to me. It was super neat. I
Yeah.
think in some of those sessions that I took, there were people on different continents. I mean, it was amazing. They had different accents and just wonderful stories and experiences. And I met one of the gentlemen that was on my first podcast in one of my classes, and we would have never had a
Oh,
chance to
wow.
meet. And so it was great to meet him and get to know him better and have him on the podcast and all of that, just because of our opportunity to meet virtually and build that community, expand it beyond
Yeah.
our local areas. So
Yeah.
that is a
Absolutely.
benefit.
An absolute benefit. I agree.
Yeah. What advice would you give to coaches who want to integrate mastermind style collaboration into their own practices?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of the word experiment and pilot, and just to kind of give oneself grace to try different things and try different structures. And even inside my organization, we're looking at, employee resource group and town halls, and I think it's just really important for coaches or facilitators of any kind to just try different structure to see what works best for your organization. But I will say it really does help to have structure, because without structure, you lose a lot of benefit and people drop out. But try different things. And, on here you see that kind of the general structure that I follow and that I've learned. But there are a lot of different other ways. There are different structures that are also beneficial. There are some structures where people share sort of round robin with no interruption, and they don't ask each other questions. They just share, and that's the end of it. That's very powerful too. So try different things out and see what works for you and your group or your organization.
If someone was on the fence about joining a masterminds group, what would you say to them?
Well, I would never force them, you know that, but I would say just come and observe. You don't have to participate. You don't have to, share, ask questions, anything like that. I'm actually a firm believer in trials, just trying it out just to see what it's like. And I believe that people should only come to them if they feel a certain degree of comfort. We're sort of taught get out of your comfort zone, but I don't think anybody should ever be forced to join a mastermind. That's why in my organization, one thing that makes it successful, it's optional. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of curmudgeons feeling forced to be there, and that never makes anybody happy. So it's better to benefit from a groundswell than from any kind of forced behavior, I think.
Those are good points. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. And I also want to give you a chance, if listeners want to contact you or learn more about Masterminds, what would be the best way they could do that?
Yeah, so the way they can contact me is I am out there on lindapandey.com. That's LINDAPANDEY.com. And they can email me. I love interacting and networking, and I always love to talk to anybody who wants to talk about any of these topics. So I welcome anyone reaching out to me with questions about coaching, consulting, leadership development, or, masterminds. I really
Well,
appreciate you having me, Candria.
yes, thank
It's
you
been
so
really
much for
fun.
sharing. I hope that the listeners gained a lot of insight and have some new ideas that they want to apply to their own experience in business or school or work, wherever they want to apply it. And if they're interested, maybe join one of your sessions in the future. And I hope you'll come back again on a podcast and stay connected and have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
summer.
Oh, thanks so much, Candria. You too.
Okay.
Talk to you later.
Bye.